Nelson Mandela was a non-violent anti-apartheid activist politician who became South Africa's first black president from 1994 to 1999. Mandela became actively involved in anti-apartheid movement on his early 20s. He joined the ANC in 1942. For 20 years, he directed a campaign for peace, nonviolence, defense against South Africa's government, and the racial policies. Beginning in 1962, Mandela spent 27 years in prison for political offenses. Nelson Mandela will continue to be an inspiration for civil rights activists worldwide. Nelson Mandela was a brave man who stood up for what he believed in and who helped others. Mandela was a black nationalist and the first black president of South Africa. His negotiations in the early 1900s with South African President F.W. Clerk helped end the country's system in racial segregation. They were both awarded with a Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 for their efforts. Nelson Mandela also formed a part of the African National Congress known as the ANC. The ANC is a Republic of South African governing political party. Today, the ANC remains the dominant political party in South Africa. Nelson Mandela was born July 18, 1918 in Moscow, South Africa. His father, Gatla Henry, served as South African consular chief for several years, but he lost his title of origin over a dispute with local colonial magistrate. Mandela was a child when this happened, and this forced his mother to move with her family in Kunu. It was a smaller village with no roads, only footpaths that linked the pastures where livestock grazed. The family lived in hut and ate local harvests of maize, pumpkin, and beans, which was all they could afford. Water came from streams, and the cooking was done outside. Mandela played the games of a young boy, toys made from natural materials available, including tree branches and clay. Mandela was baptized in the Methodist Church. He was the first one in his family to receive formal education. Mandela finished his primary studies at local missionary school. He was given the name Nelson in school when he was 7 years old. Nelson's name means to pull a branch off a tree and troublemaker. When Mandela's father died from lung disease, it changed his life dramatically. He was adopted by Chief, the acting regent of the Thambu people. It was a gesture he did to Mandela's father, who years earlier had recommended him to become chief. Mandela left his carefree life in Kunu. He feared that he would never see his village again. He traveled by motor car to the capital of Thembuland, to the chief's royal residence. He quickly adapted to the lifestyle. Mandela had the same expectations as the regent's other two children. Mandela took classes in one-room school next to the palace, studying English, Xhosa, and geography. It was then that Mandela became interested in South African history. He learned that how African people had lived in peace until the coming of white people. According to the elders, the children of South Africa had previously lived as brothers, but white had shattered this fellowship. Black men shared their land, air, and water with the whites, while the whites took all the things for themselves. When Mandela was 16, it was time for him to do the traditional African circumcision ritual that marks that he is ready for manhood. The ceremony was just not a surgical procedure, but an elaborate ritual and representation for manhood. In Africa, if any uncircumcised man cannot inherit his father's wealth, marry, or officiate at tribal rituals. Mandela saw this as an opportunity to partake his people customs and felt ready to make the transition from boyhood to manhood. Mandela then attended Clarkberry Boarding Institution, a Methodist secondary school where he excelled boxing and track. In 1939, Mandela attended Fort Hare University, where he first became involved in student protest. He refused to accept an injustice, unfairness, and inequality. Fort Hare University was considered South Africa's equivalent of the University of Oxford or Harvard University. drawing scholars from all parts of the sub-Sahara Africa. Mandela took the required classes but forced on Roman Dutch law to prepare him for a career in civil services as an interpreter or clerk. In his second year at Fort Hare, Mandela was elected Student Representative Consul. For some time, students had been dissatisfied with the food and lack of power held by the SRC. During the election, a majority of students voted to boycott unless their demands were met. Mandela resigned from his position, seeing this as an act of insubordination. Dr. Kerr expelled Mandela for the rest of the year and gave him an ultimatum. He could return to school if he agreed to serve on the SRC. Mandela went back home and the regent was furious, telling him that he would have to recall his decision and go back to school in the fall. The regent had then arranged a marriage for his adopted son. The regent wanted to make sure that Mandela's life was properly planned and the arrangement was within his rights. Mandela then ran away from home to Johannesburg in 1941, where he first started working various jobs as a night watchman and was a law clerk, while still trying to complete his bachelor's degree. Mandela studied law at the University of Wits, where he was involved in racial discrimination and forged key relationships with black and white activists. Nelson renounced his claim to the chief station and to become lawyer. When he passed his qualification exam to become lawyer, he joined the ANC in 1944. ANC was founded in 1912 as a South African Native National Congress. ANC is a black liberation group, and then Nelson Mandela became leader of its youth league. Also, the same year he met and married his first wife, Evelyn Mays. They had 4 children before their divorce in 1957. Nelson Mandela really committed to the ANC, and the group grew stronger in 1948 after the election victory, where it denounced a formal system of racial discrimination and segregation. Mandela helped lead the ANC's in 1952 campaign for defense of unjust laws, and they traveled across the country to organize protests against the discriminatory policies and promote the Freedom Charter. In 1952, Mandela and Oliver Tambo opened South Africa's first black law firm, and it offered free or low-cost legal counsels to the ones who got affected by the apartheid legislation. Also that year, Mandela played an important role in launching a campaign of defense against South African pass laws, which required non-whites to carry documents known as passes, passbooks, or reference books. He traveled through the country as part of the campaign, trying to build support for the non-violent means of protest against the discriminatory laws. On December 5, 1958, Mandela and 155 other activists were arrested and went to trial for treason. All the defendants were acquitted in 1961. He divorced his wife and married Winnie Mandela. The next year, police opened fire in a peaceful black protest in Sharpeville, killing 69 people. The government then banned the ANC, making the ANC go underground. Mandela then decided it was time for a more rational approach than passive resistance. Mandela then went underground and was one of the founders of Spear of the Nation, the military wing of the ANC. In 1962, Mandela went to Algeria for training in guerrilla warfare and sabotage, returning to South Africa later that year. On August 5th, Mandela was arrested at roadblock in Natal. He was subsequently sentenced to 5 years in prison. On October 1962, Mandela and several other men were tried for sabotage, treason, and violence conspiracy in the famous Rivon trial. Police officers found arms and acquitted at the headquarters of the underground Mganko. Mandela then admitted to the same charges against him in his speech. His famous speech, "I am prepared to die," got international attention. On June 12, 1968, he was sentenced to life in prison, narrowly escaping the death penalty.
The day Nelson gave evidence, it was so terrible to watch.
The idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
From 1964 to 1983, Mandela was incarcerated at the Robben Island prison. Mandela was kept at the maximum security Portsmouth prison until 1988. He had a small cell without bed or plumbing. Mandela was forced to do hard labor. As a black political prisoner, Mandela had fewer privileges than other inmates. He was allowed to see his wife Winnie Mandela, who he married in 1958, and was the mother of his two younger daughters. Mandela was only allowed to see his wife once every 6 months. There were reports where guards would bury inmates to the ground to their necks and urinate on them. Mandela earned a bachelor's degree at the Law from University of London. He served as a mentor to his fellow prisoners. His draft and autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, published 5 years after his release. Even though Mandela was a prisoner, he still represented a symbol leader of anti-apartheid movement. Oliver Tambo introduced the Free Nelson Mandela campaign in 1980. The government offered Mandela's freedom in exchange for various political compromise, including the renouncement of violence and resignation, but he rejected. In 1982, Mandela was moved to Portsmouth prison to the mainland, and in 1988 he was placed under house arrest. The following year, F.W. Clark lifted the ban of the ANC and called for a non-racist South Africa. On February 11, 1990, he ordered Mandela's release. Nelson Mandela and Clark then received the Nobel Peace Prize in December 1993. On April 26, 1994, more than 2 million South Africans turned out to cast ballots in the country's fourth multiracial parliamentary election in history. May 10, Mandela was sworn in as the first black president of South Africa. As president, Mandela established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate human rights political violations. He introduced numerous social and economic programs designed to improve the living standards of South Africa's black population. In 1996, Mandela established a strong central government based on majority rule and prohibit discrimination against minorities, including whites. Mandela was improving race relations, discouraging blacks from retailing against the white minority, and building a new international image of a united South Africa. He formed a government of national unity and proclaimed the country a rainbow nation at peace with itself and the world. It was a major step toward reconciliation. He encouraged blacks and whites alike to rally around the predominantly African national rugby team when South Africa hosted the 1995 Rugby World Cup. His marriage with Winnie had ended in 1996 and married Grace in 1998. Mandela did not see a second term of South African president and was succeeded by Mbeki in 1999. Even though Nelson Mandela had left the politicals behind, he was still a champion of peace and social justice for his own country and around the world. Mandela established organizations including the Nelson Mandela Foundation in 1999 and the Elders in 2007, an independent group of Republic figures committed to address global problems and easing human suffering. In 2002, Mandela became a vocal advocate for AIDS awareness and treatment programs. The deceased later claimed the life of his son, Cambodia in 1950 to 2005. Mandela was treated for prostate cancer in 2001 and weakened by other health issues. In 2008, Mandela had several celebrations in South Africa, Great Britain, and other countries for his 98th birthday. In 2009, United Nations declared July 18th Nelson Mandela International Day in recognition of the South African leader's contribution to democracy, freedom, peace, and human rights around the world. Nelson Mandela died on December 5th, 2013 from lung infection. Mandela was married 3 times and had 6 children. First wife, Evelyn Mace, together they had 4 children. Mabida Timberland died in 1964. MacArthur died in 2005. Makasiwi and Mackie. The couple divorced in 1957. 1958, Mandela married Winnie Mandela. Together they had 2 girls. Senani, now Argentina's South African ambassador, and Sindizawa, South African ambassador of Denmark. Couple split in 1996. In 1998, Mandela married Grace Mandela, the first education minister with whom he remained until his death in 2013. Mandela became the national president of the ANC Youth League in 1950. Mandela was leading opponent of the 1948 apartheid legislation. Mandela co-founded the first Black legal partnership in South Africa. His speech during the Rivonia trial is considered one of the greatest speeches of the 20th century. Nelson played the leading role in ending apartheid. Mandela was the first Black president of South Africa. He focused on national reconciliation during his presidency. Nelson served as the Secretary General of the Non-Elite League movement from 1998 to 1999. 4 million people were out of population, 23 million lacked of electricity, 12 million lacked of clean water supplies, 2 million children were not in school. While Mandela was president, more than 2 million people were connected to electricity, water access was extended to 3 million people, 1.5 million children were brought into the education system, and 750,000 houses were constructed, housing nearly 3 million people. In 1994, free health care was introduced to children under 6 and pregnant women. From 1999 to 1999, Mandela served as the Secretary General of the Non-Elite League movement, a group of states that were not formally allied with or against any major power. Mandela played a key role as a mediator in the ethnic conflict between Tutsi and Hutu political groups of the Rhodanian Civil War, and was leading figure in calling for sanctions against the Nigerian leader Sani Abacha, whose regimes committed severe human rights violations. He founded a number of organizations to promote equality and fight problems like AIDS. In 1995, Mandela co-founded the Nelson Mandela Children's Funds, helping individuals from birth to age 22, particularly orphans of AIDS crisis. In 1999, he founded the Nelson Mandela Foundation to promote his vision of freedom and equality for all. Mandela raised money to build schools and clinics in South African rural areas, advocate for peace and equality. The elders focused on climate change, HIV, AIDS, and poverty, and helped resolve conflicts. Nelson was awarded the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize. Mandela received more than 260 honors in his lifetime. On December 5, 2013, Mandela died in his home in Johannesburg at age 95, after suffering a lung infection in January 2011. Mandela was hospitalized in Johannesburg, and he had surgery done for a stomach ailment in his early 2012, and was relieved after a few days later returning to Kunu. Mandela then was hospitalized after several times over the next several years in December 2012, March 2013, and June 2013. In June 2013, Mandela's wife, Grace, canceled a scheduled appearance in London to remain at her husband's side. Jacob Zuma, South African president, issued a statement in response to public concern over Mandela's March 2013 health scare, asking for support in the form of a prayer.
How worried are you by this?
Well, it is a matter of concern. Former President Mandela had to be admitted around midnight last night. That is an indication in itself that the doctors were concerned. It's a recurrence of his lung infection. They are doing everything possible to keep him comfortable and have it treated. But at the same time, we need to bear in mind that the doctors are taking no chances and doing everything possible as quickly as possible when they detect a recurrence of the lung infection.
When you talk about a lung infection, Mac, do we mean pneumonia here?
No, we don't have it. The doctors haven't specified, but we know that he has a history of lung problems, from TB to proneness to infection. So at present, the doctors are saying it's a recurrence of the old lung infection.
And is he conscious at the moment?
Yes, he is conscious and he's under treatment.
Yeah. And generally, I mean, how is his demeanour when you last saw him? How frail is he or otherwise?
Former President Mandela is 94 years of age. He is frail. He is been in a good frame of mind. The last time I saw him, during the time when President Zuma visited him, he was in a very good and cheerful state. But as we know, he was recently admitted for a scheduled series of tests, and that just took a day and he was out, and that was fine. So, and he is being monitored at home very carefully and around the clock. But this time around, the doctors became concerned around late at night, and they immediately took him to hospital so that he could receive attention in the best atmosphere.
President Zuma has asked the people of South Africa and the people of the world to pray for him. Would you echo that?
Yes, we all need to. We adore and love this man, and we all want him to be with us for as long as possible, and therefore any recurrence of any illness in his case requires us to think and keep him in our thoughts and wish him well and hope that he will continue to be with us.
Nelson's father had 4 wives, and he is the youngest of all the sons. Mandela attended boarding school. In 1968, both his mother and son passed away, but he was not able to go to the funeral because he was in prison. When he was done with his presidency, he became involved in helping people suffering from AIDS. One of his hobbies was boxing, and Nelson Mandela is a Christian. In 2004, he announced that he would retire from public domain. Nelson Mandela was hospitalized for a respiratory infection for over a month in Pretoria. He was in serious condition with a lung infection and was in life support for almost 6 months. He died at his home on December 5, 2013, at age 95. State funeral was held in Kunu. He was buried in his family graveyard in Kunu. In 1994, Mandela published Long Walk to Freedom, which he secretly wrote while still in prison. The book inspired the 2013 movie Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. He also published his life and struggles, among them No Easy Walk to Freedom, Nelson Mandela, The Struggle is My Life, and Nelson Mandela, Favorite African Folk Tales. In 2009, Mandela's birthday, July 18th, was declared Mandela's Day, an international day to promote global peace and celebrate the South African leader's legacy. Nelson Mandela, Center of Memory, encouraged citizens worldwide to give back the way Mandela has thought throughout his lifetime. Mr. Mandela gave 67 years of his life fighting for the rights of humanity. All we are asking is that everybody gives 67 minutes of their time, whether it's supporting your chosen charity or serving your local community, to the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory.